Yeah, what do you think that is? You're in it.
Is it like a phase of life? Like
yeah.
Is it like a coming of age? Like
Yeah.
realizing how the world works?
Yeah.
Maybe the way we were raised, being given everything wasn't the right way.
Okay.
Now that we've had to work for, an income and
Yeah.
everything else in a car and paying off student debt, so that would be my answer.
That's a great answer. What's your first name?
Cameron.
Cameron, where are you from?
From here, from Detroit.
All right, well, you just nailed it.
Thank you.
You really did. Hello there. I'm Dr. Ziggy-Kozicki, and I want to talk with you about the Millennial Moment. This is a time of transition when a large group of people who are going to influence us are going to have their moment. It's their time. It's coming. And for many of us who had our time, it's time to welcome them to the world. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996, and they're approximately the largest group that we've seen in a long time. They're between the ages of 22 and 37, and they're a new generation of people with much to offer. Millennials are diverse, much more diverse than any group that's ever come along. And if we think about millennials in relationship to previous groups that have shaped this country, we have to think about those that were born between 1928 and 45 and are sometimes referred to as the silent generation. And then those that were born between 1946 and 64, those are really considered a generation of people who were leading up to the Generation X, and these are the boomers. And they've been the largest generation. Generation X, which is between 1965 and 80, is a group of people that are kind of sandwiched between these two large populations. And of course, the millennials, 1981 to 96, is what we're going to be focusing on right now. So it's estimated there's 83.1 million people who fall into this category. And they've surpassed baby boomers in terms of the largest living generation in the United States. The expectation is that millennials are going to bring about a series of major changes in the United States. And we have to consider that they were very much influenced by a number of events. All of us were influenced by 9/11, but most millennials were between the ages of 5 and 20 when the 9/11 terrorist attacks shook this nation. In addition to that, they were shaped by the two wars that followed, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So maybe this is a good time to look at some interviews that I had with millennials, and they can tell their own story. They have a lot to offer, so let's listen.
Well, I just graduated from college in May, so I am in a whole new world now. I have a full-time job. I'm a teacher. So it's kind of weird going from a student to being a teacher and being on the opposite side of that, and still as a young person. And my coworkers are fairly old, so relating with them is difficult, but it's also very interesting. Learning new things. I mean, learning how to manage my finances has been tough for me, but also has been interesting. I don't know, just simple things like like, where do I spend my money? Where do I spend my time now that I don't have to study? And also finding who my friends are. I think that's a big thing too. You know, in college, you're surrounded by so many people, and now that I'm not in college, I'm kind of hanging out with a sort of a small group of people and finding out who my real friends are. And I don't know. I really enjoy being an adult, as we say, adulting. But yeah, I don't know. I'm learning how to live life after college, and I'm learning a lot.
Is there anything about the world that you're now adult in that you didn't expect, or you thought has let you down, or given you more than you expected?
I think it's just just all the tasks that I didn't have to do in college. Like, there's so many more things I have to pay for. I mean, I have to start looking at student loans, you know, insurance. There's all these things that I didn't have to do in college, and also not having to rely on my parents anymore is a big thing too. So trying to figure those things out on my own, and I mean, it's a learning experience, but you know, that comes with getting older.
Yeah, I probably have already seen the impact of millennials in this country. For instance, millennials were the group that started to change the way we look at politics. In fact, most millennials were between 12 and 27 in 2008 and became a youth voice and helped elect the first black president of the United States. The Millennial Moment is one in which all of us have been changed because they have learned how to master the internet. And think about this. The baby boomers grew up with television. I grew up with television, and it connected us with the world. Generation X grew up with the computer revolution and learned how to manipulate so much data and information using the computer. Millennials, they came of age during the internet explosion. The iPhone, for instance, wasn't launched until 2007. Many of us take it for granted now, but they have learned to make technology a part of their life. And in addition to that, as globalization has taken place, millennials have become part of a racially and ethnically diverse adult generation. They're probably the most diverse generation we've seen. But keep this in mind. The next generation that follows them is going to be even more diverse. So what is happening is we're becoming a much more diverse nation. The diversity is mostly reflected, however, in younger people. And if you look at the silent generation, 79% of that generation was mostly white and had ancestry that was connected to Europe or something like that. When you look at millennials, 56% come from that kind of a background, and the rest come from a number of other places. And they're accepting of that, and they understand that that is a part of what the world is. Millennial demography is more non-white than any generation that's come along, 40% in fact. And it's by contrast to the silent generation, which is 79% white, looking at things much differently, much more open and accepting of things. So millennials have developed what some people would call a more liberal view on many issues, and they are really strongly leaning towards what would be considered democratic values as opposed to the older cohort groups that have come along before them. And the Millennial Moment is maybe coming off to a slow start, but as it enters the workforce, it's going to make some changes. Now, one of the reasons the millennials had a slow start had nothing to do with them, but in fact that they came to the adult age during a time of one of the worst recessions we've faced. And that has really shaped also how they think about things. So this would be a good time to probably think about what they're going to do in the economy. Let's look at some interviews I did with millennials, and they can offer some more opinions about how they see themselves and the world around them. Being a millennial, what do you think about who you are and what's going on in your world?
I feel like it's a little struggle right now because we're conforming to the world, so like we're the new generation.
Yeah.
So it's a high priority, you know. We're living up to it. We have our grandparents to look out for, so it's a lot.
Well, we're in the technology age. We're all on our phones, but we're also more connected now than ever because we got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. People say we're not connected, but we're actually more connected than ever. A lot of us are also more living now at home than ever previously before, just because we're not getting paid as much, not getting as much hours, and everything's getting more expensive. That's another thing that's going on with millennials at the moment too.
What do you have to look forward to as a millennial?
Getting a house for my own self, buying a vehicle that I am happy with, that I can roll with for the rest of my life, or at least for a good dozen years or more that I would like to have, and not have it rust out, and not health insurance that I'm paying for myself, other insurance, stuff like that I would love to have. Get married and not have to worry about other stuff. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Well, that's pretty insightful. You got a good list. I mean, you really do. Your friends who are millennials, how do they traffic through the world? What kinds of things are important to them? What do you see them about?
Kind of the same stuff. They just want to be able to get paid more, be able to live on their own and not have to worry about going into debt and not have health insurance, and just if they happen to break their arm, they don't have health insurance, they have to pay out of pocket for it, which they don't want to do. So I've had friends that have had stuff like that happen to them. They break their arm or tear a tendon or something like that, and they can't go to the hospital because they don't have health insurance.
So, as a millennial, what kinds of things surprised you, or what kinds of things disappointed you, or made you elated about becoming a millennial adult?
I don't know. I would say, I think the whole idea of getting labeled as a millennial is kind of weird. I see like the fact that your generation is kind of fluid. Like I was born and raised in El Salvador, and we don't use those labels. We're just like different. We don't use Generation X, Generation Y. It's an American thing. So when I came here, it was kind of weird, like, that people expect certain things to happen as a millennial, mainly like bad things. So I know some people at my company, and they say, oh, millennials come late to work, or millennials are not ready for the job, they're not ready for industry, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, well, I'm a millennial, I guess, and I'm not like that. At least I don't think I am like that. So maybe, yeah, like the expectations that they have about us as a group of people. Just like you were asking my friend before, you were like, you're supposed to change the world, and I'm like, isn't everybody supposed to change the world regardless of what generation you are? Or, yeah.
So you have an interesting perspective because you did come from El Salvador. So when you look at American millennials or boomers or whatever, what stands out to you as somebody looking from the outside in?
I think it's true that there are very obvious traits to every generation. Like you say, baby boomers look at the world a different way. They usually like work in a company, and they work in that company until they retire and then they get out. Millennials are like, I'm gonna work there as long as I get something out of it, as long as I feel like I'm doing a change, and if I don't like it, I'm gonna go somewhere else. I'm gonna go across the street. So it's not like there's some traits and attitudes true about like the general idea of the generation, but I think it's surprising how much people want to fit in the definition. Like, I'm a millennial and I should act like this, or I'm a millennial and I will do this. I'm a millennial and I think like this. Is it interesting?
Do you think that people who are millennials are going to have a certain legacy or leave something behind that people are going to say, oh yeah, that's what the millennials did?
I think there is a paradigm shift in the way that we relate to each other, in the way that we think, in the way that we buy, almost in everything that we do. There has definitely been a change in everything that, like, there will be a before and after. My kids will not I think I still have a few traits from my parents, and like I think like my parents a little bit, but I think my kids will definitely be very different. Their worldview and the way they think and the way they like interact with the world will be very different from their grandparents. So there will be a before and after, and I think a lot of it has to do with technology.
What's important to me?
Yeah, as a millennial, what's important to you?
In regards to what?
Just your life and where you're going, what you're doing?
I think being happy as long as it's not at the expense of someone else. I think that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah. And
But I get the boom.
these guys are hungry here.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to in your lifetime, in your future?
For me personally, I'd probably say, experiencing the things that bring me joy. So right now that would be like traveling, meeting different cultures. I've been blessed enough to have been able to have already traveled to a number of locations already, including, across the Caribbean, in Italy, so more specifically Rome, Florence, and a little place called Lake Garda with a beautiful view of the Swiss Alps off in the behind the lake. But I think experiencing different cultures and pursuing your passions is probably pursuing my passion in particular is probably what I'm most.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges you face in your lifetime right now, you think?
I wouldn't say it's anything, because I come from I'm like, middle of the road family, not super rich, not super poor, but I'm very privileged in the sense that, I've had opportunities that have allowed me to kind of, further myself, both financially and, mature. They've allowed me to mature in ways that I wouldn't have expected, 5-10 years ago. So I think the biggest challenges for me right now are probably my own either inhibitions or, shortcomings,
Okay.
I'm not good.
What about for people of your generation? What are some of the challenges you see them facing?
I can't really. So like the kind of issues with that kind of a generalization is because it's really easy to say, Generation X, everybody in this generation has these problems. Oh, okay, well millennials, everybody has baby boomers. It's very easy to like categorize them as one whole group and say they all have the same problems when in fact everybody has different problems, everybody has different issues, and it's a more individualized thing. I'd probably say if you had to press me for an answer, though, I'd probably have to say learning and understanding how to cope and properly respond to social media, because nowadays you have things like Facebook posts ruining job opportunities for people, and so this is a fairly new thing, where you broadcast yourself, across the internet for the world to see, and since it's such a new thing, people haven't really hammered out, proper etiquette and proper form, proper procedure when conducting themselves online.
That's a great observation. Hey, are you a millennial?
I actually am not.
Not?
Not,
Okay.
not the year I was born.
Oh, okay.
I'm
All right.
93, does that
Yeah,
count?
all right, okay. We're just trying to get some interviews.
1993 is not a millennial?
Yeah, it is.
93 is,
93 is. Yeah.
Fuck it.
All right. Yeah, that's the attitude I love. Hey, I'm just curious. What do you think the millennial moment is that you're living in right now?
It's a lot of people injuring their necks and spines to look at their cell phones. Myself included.
I look at the cell phone too, but maybe not as much as you.
Yeah, no, I regrettably do it way too much.
Yeah. Do you think that the social media and the cell phone thing is kind of overplayed by people, or?
To some degree, but I definitely feel like there's a general sense of disconnection between people. You'll see a room full of people hanging out and all of them are buried in their phones. That's very real, and like sometimes I'll be the first to notice it, sometimes I won't, and then I'll just look around the room like,
Yeah.
wow, what?
Are you fighting it now, or are you trying to break away from it? or?
Yes and no. I mean, for work, I need it. At the same time, I work like remotely. I work in a very digital industry, so I have to be on the phone or computer all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, you're the first generation with the internet.
First generation to like grow up on it. Yeah, I was like 9 when I started using it regularly.
Yeah. So, do you have any comments about millennials? Any thoughts about them?
She's only 3 years in.
Yeah, I was like, I thought 96 was actually the like 97 was the cutoff year. That's why. So I'm actually 96. Honestly, if it's about technology, I feel like it's a very necessary thing in today's day, since like most major companies use it to interact with their employers, also to see their history, to see what kind of employers they're hiring. I do think it's like a necessary thing, and the fact that we've grown with it, I feel like it's gonna actually develop into something that we are going to need, especially with the new generation that is coming around, between like gaming and just the internet in general. It's the way to get your information faster as well.
Do you think millennials have then really coined or seized on this whole idea of using technology?
I would believe so, yes. Yeah.
So that's going to be the mark that millennials leave, is they have put technology to many uses?
Yes.
Okay.
For multiple things. I mean, technology is all around us constantly. I mean, for advertising, you know, now there's not even regular billboards. Now there's those electronic billboards that constantly shift through different advertisements, which grant other companies the opportunity to advertise whatever they're trying to advertise. So yeah, I do think it's going to be like a serious thing in the future. Just not even for millennials. I think just for the adult world too. You know, the other adults that are actually dealing with it as well.
Are you guys millennials?
I guess technically, yeah.
Technically you are. Can I ask you, what is the biggest challenge you face as a millennial?
We're from Canada.
From Canada? Well, it doesn't make a difference. It's like that all over the world. What's the biggest thing that you've got to deal with right now?
Buying a house, I guess.
Buying a house?
Yeah, it's definitely a big one.
Yeah.
Like, just being be able to afford like a nice, livable home for like your family, like if you want to have like wife and kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In like a bigger city, because like unless you want to like move out to somewhere in the country, like then you could probably afford one. But if you want to live in the city or anything, it's pretty much unattainable.
Okay. What about how you feel things are going to end up for you in the next 5 to 10 years?
I feel like things might like turn up eventually.
Okay.
I feel like you get more. You work longer, you kind of put the work in and get more opportunities and stuff like that.
Okay.
Maybe get more, more chances to make it all work out.
Well, millennials, an interesting group of people. I must admit, I have some children that fall into that category, and Gen Xers. So I have had some personal experiences in this, but I'm always fascinated with this generation. Again, they got off to a slow start because of the economy, and I think sometimes people have looked at both Gen Xers and the millennials as being slackers in some way. You know, they were really put up against a very hard break in the economy, and they're recovering from it. And you know, we praise, for instance, the people who went through the Great Depression, and they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and they made things great. This group is going to do the same thing. We just got to give them some time. In fact, I think they're going to probably do it in a different way than we expect. But anyways, when we think about that silent generation, those people that are pretty much slowly leaving, they did a lot for us. But the younger generation is more concerned about economic inequality than this silent generation is. And I think it is in part because they had a slow start and they saw what could happen in a time of a recession. And so what we have to keep in mind is that a large majority of millennials have a different look at things, like, for instance, immigration. They see immigration, as do the Gen Xers, as adding something to our economy, adding something to what is going to take place. Boomers also feel that way, but not as strongly. And when you look at the silent generation, and these are the people that oftentimes you'll find watching Fox News and being fearful of a caravan of people coming up from Guatemala or something that are going to somehow change their world. They think differently. They see these people as contributing to a global economy and fitting in just like other generations have in the past. And so they're much more tolerant of immigrants, and they're much more tolerant of the idea that a nation is made up of diversity. And they're still patriotic, don't get me wrong, because that's not one of the things that they have given up on. Across generations, in fact, when we look at the breakdown, this is probably the most tolerant group of people that has been around when it comes to welcoming other people from other places into America. So that, you know, you think about that, that's going to change America. It's going to welcome many people from around the world, and we're probably going to see a much more diverse America. with the idea of war, too, millennials have a different view, as do Generation X and boomers also. But they're much more in the belief system that diplomacy, not going to war, is the solution to problems in the world. Now, this is in stark contrast to other generations who might feel that you have to have military muscle and you have to go out and do something on a military scale to make changes take place. And so when we look at diplomacy, if we look at some of the things that are going to take place, they're going to be opposed to some of the ideas. And keep this in mind. If there is going to be military conflict, maybe much like the baby boomers, they're going to question whether or not war is the solution. I think of that great song, War, What Is It Good For? Absolutely nothing. Well, they may be having songs like that also. So if we think about millennials, again, they view diplomacy as the way to go in settling conflicts. Along with that, their political views are more tied into what I said earlier, the Democratic Party. They had a very favorable response for Obama's presidency. They have a very disfavorable response to the Trump presidency. They're not happy with it at all. And we can expect that that's going to show up in the voter booth, as it just did in the midterm elections here in the United States. So millennials are the most Democratic generation, silenced the most Republican. So we can see the two ends there. And we know that the silent generation is leaving. So millennials are going to become much more influential. They're consistently liberal, more liberal than any other group. And along with that, 2/3 of millennials say that government has a responsibility to provide health care to them and to others. And so we can probably see that the idea of some kind of national health insurance, universal coverage, Medicare for all, something like that's going to happen in their time frame. The other thing is, millennials are the least likely to say that belief in God is necessary to be moral. Now, we've already seen this in terms of, you look at attendance in churches across the United States. If you look at who's in there, it's a lot of the silent generation, the older generation. Millennials are not tuning into that. That doesn't mean they're immoral. They just believe that you can have morality without necessarily tying religion into it. So this means that there's going to be a different view of how these things interplay in the future. It may create some conflicts. It may free people up. It's going to be an interesting transition. So here's something to keep in mind. Millennials are changing our world. This is their moment. This is their time. They're going to be the most dominant influence from this point onward. And they're going to gain an influence with each passing year. And all of us who are from another generation need to welcome that, welcome the creativity, welcome the opportunity to see our world change and transform. I think many of the social problems that we're facing, like violence and poverty and the climate change issues, they're going to be dramatically affected by these people. They're going to have an impact on politics. They're going to have an impact on how people live. And I think one of the things that we're probably going to see come out of this is a push for more equality, for more civil rights, for more of the kinds of things that people say is the American spirit, is the American tradition. So if I can wrap this up in any way, I think millennials are a welcome change. They're going to bring something new, something necessary to our world. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I know some people are threatened by it, but embrace the change. Make it a part of what you're going to see happen. And not only that, but give millennials the opportunity to prove themselves. And let's not diss them. Let's not make them feel unwelcome. Let's say, it's your time. How can we help? Thank you very much for watching this program. And remember, if you run into a millennial someplace, or if you have one, appreciate them. Thank you. And this has been Ziggy with The Slippery Slope.